Why do the media insist on calling Catherine Kate Middleton? What would Richard Eden do if he was allowed to ask the royal family anything? And just where does he buy his socks from? Well, you asked and we delivered. Welcome to a very special Q&A episode of Palace Confidential. I'm Jo Elvin and I'm joined by Richard Eden and Richard Eden alone. Every week we get hundreds of comments and questions directed specifically at our Richard Garden of Eden. So we thought it would be best to sit down with him now and get him to answer them once and for all. Regular fans of Palace Confidential will know what's coming. I'm about to ask you to please make sure to hit that subscribe button for more exclusive royal content like this. By subscribing and hitting the little notification bell, you will never miss another episode from our unrivaled team of royal experts. And if you want to see even more of Richard, and I know you do, you lot are insatiable, you can sign up to our newsletter by scanning the QR code on screen now with your phone camera or by clicking the link in the description below. It's free, so there's nothing to lose. Now, let's get on with this interrogation. I'm in my Jeremy Paxman era.
Interrogation? You're making me nervous.
I know,
really
I'm very excited because you have really delivered with your questions for our Richard. First of all, I don't want to make you feel old. Actually, I probably do a little bit. But you have been writing about the monarchy for 20 years. And lots of Palace Confidential viewers want to hear about your journalistic career, including Sarah Bellin, who asked, why did you choose to go into journalism and what story so far in your career are you most proud of?
Interesting question. I'll be completely honest. I chose to go into journalism because at university I was in my house, I was sharing with someone who was editor of the student newspaper, and he remembered how I would always get into arguments and debates, and I was always giving sort of controversial views. So he thought, you know what, I'll give you a column. So I had my first column,
amazing,
which was called A View from Eden.
And do you remember what you first wrote about? What was your first searing op-ed?
Well, it was kind of meant to be controversial, and it was the opposite of what everyone else was saying. So it was things like, why smoking's actually a great thing. And, look, to be honest, if I read those columns now, I'm sure it'd be hugely embarrassing.
Oh, have you got them somewhere though?
I hope not, but they're probably buried at my parents' house or something. But that's what got me into journalism. And then I was in a local paper, Western Morning News in Plymouth, great newspaper, and then became a trainee at the Daily Telegraph and got into diaries then, actually. And that's when I started writing about the royal family.
Okay, and so when did you particularly start love royal reporting?
Well, I think as a diary editor, if viewers don't know diaries, social diaries, in Britain it's the royal family that's at the top of that social tree. So, we write about all different types of people, whether it's show business or socialites, but the most interesting stories and the most popular do tend to be about the royal family. So, even from 20 years ago, I have been doing those. In fact, I think my first royal story was one, it was on the front page of the Telegraph, was when Prince Harry joined Eton. It was the official photograph.
Oh my goodness, what year was that?
About 2000, I think. So yeah, it goes back a bit. But
and is that your favourite royal story, or is that like picking a favourite child, trying to think of the career highlight?
I think possibly my favourite story actually was one at the Telegraph when we got wind that Queen Elizabeth was going to be giving a new house to William and Catherine as a I think it was a belated wedding gift. I mean, other people might give their child or their grandchild, I don't know what, some nice plates, yep, or, a microwave or a toaster. Yeah. But in the royal family, they can give houses.
Nice.
And the Queen decided to give them Animal Hall on the Sandringham estate. So slight problem was there was actually someone living there. So we contacted, I remember ringing up the man whose family they were living at this house, and we said, actually, we've heard that your house is about to be given to William and Catherine. I'll be honest with you, he wasn't that happy.
Oh my God, so were you the one who delivered the news?
Yes.
Oh dear.
Unfortunately, it did feel a bit like a sort of death knock, but no, but to be fair, that's part of the lease, that you know that if they want you to move out, you have to. So
yeah, but you probably don't want to hear that from a journalist.
No, I think that they'd loved living in Anmer Hall, this family, but they moved to another property, and I think in the end they were perfectly happy. But it was a great story, and I was delighted when it turned out to be true, and they did actually move, because, you know, come on, in our business sometimes you do get tips and they may be true at the time, as we say, but then they turns out not to be the case.
Absolutely, yes, indeed. And now this next question is one we get a lot in the comments of Palace Confidential, and I believe, Richard, we've answered it before more than once, but for the avoidance of doubt, we're going to do it again. Geraldine Kearney wants to know, why does the Daily Mail insist on referring to Catherine, Princess of Wales, by her maiden name of Kate Middleton? After 14 years, it's actually quite disrespectful to her, and I've recently read her brother's book, and in it he indicates that she was always Catherine, not Kate. It's lazy journalism to keep disrespecting her in this way. Along similar lines, Wildflowers said, when the Waleses become king and queen, will the Daily Mail continue to call William's wife by her maiden name? It's very rude. Richard, it's often the headlines that refer to Catherine, Princess of Wales, by her maiden name of Kate Middleton, isn't it? So what is the explanation? I
mean, I should say, I think it is being done less now generally. But the reason is a technical one, is that we at the Daily Mail, like all papers, we want people to read our stories. Otherwise, kind of what's the point in writing them? And I think the Kate Middleton comes up on searches more than other, so like, you know, Princess Kate or Princess Catherine hasn't sort of caught on in the same way.
Yeah.
So that's the technical reason for that. I should say, though, that, you know, for example, in Prince Harry's book, he used Kate throughout, although some people might say that was because he wasn't particularly favourable. But, you know, in the only interview we've ever had with Catherine was her engagement interview, and throughout that one, Prince William referred to her as Kate.
Yeah.
But it since seems pretty clear that she prefers Catherine. We tend to use that on Palace Confidential, but I have to say, like in newspapers where you're very tight for space.
Well, there's that too.
We do like short words. So, you know, William might become Wills, or Catherine would become Kate.
And I think it's also when it comes to the actual words in papers and online, you just like every now and again you want to break up Catherine, Catherine, Catherine with a Kate here and there, just to sort of like keep the monotony out of it in copy, isn't it?
And my goodness, look at other examples. You know, like the Duchess of York is still often referred to as Sarah Ferguson. So we have that. I have to say, my wife is Spanish actually, and she can't see what the fuss is about at all, because their tradition is women maintain their maiden names, and then children get two surnames. First one is the father's surname, the second one is the mother's. So it's just a different system. So it's certainly, if you do see Kate Middleton in a Daily Mail headline online, it is in no way negative. It's being used for just business reasons.
And algorithm purposes.
But I think we'll carry on using Catherine generally.
Absolutely, we will indeed. Now, speaking of the Princess of Wales, Patricia Miller asks, have you spoken to Catherine, Princess of Wales, one-to-one? If so, how many times, and what was your first interaction with her like? My first interaction with Catherine actually was when she was separated from Prince William. That was at a party, but I was talking to her. It actually makes me slightly wistful, because the woman I was standing next to was Tara Palmer Tompkinson, who tragically died far, far too young. And for any Americans who might not know, she was a fairly famous socialite, very friendly with the royals.
Socialite, whose parents were like best friends of King Charles. And that was at a party where I spoke to Catherine then, and I've sort of spoken to various members of her family over the years. And I have to say, you know, generally they've always been very friendly. Pippa used to be at parties more often than her sister. But, you know, I would say the royal family's been extremely lucky to have the Middletons in. I mean, come on, you know, even the attempts at controversy with, you know, the black sheep Uncle Gary, but generally, you know, they haven't brought any controversy. They've been a real boon to the royal family. So I think they've been very lucky to have them generally.
Indeed. Now, which member of the royal family have you interacted with the most?
As as a journalist and as a diarist, I definitely can't answer that one honestly.
Oh.
We don't want to reveal our sources, do
Okay.
we? But I have to be honest and say it's the more junior members of the royal family that I would meet more often. The more senior you are up the pecking order, the more distance you would keep from journalists such as myself.
From the likes of you.
Exactly.
Richard Eden.
Yeah.
Well, we've mentioned one half of the Prince and Princess of Wales, so let's talk about the other. And here we have Alexis, who says, do you think Prince William will make a good king, and do you have any concerns about when that day comes?
I think he will make a good king, yes. I think he's shown so far that he's definitely got the stature for it. Whenever he's called upon to make speeches, we've seen them at various formal events, he's done so really well. And I think he, with his various causes, has shown he's a serious person, isn't he?
Yeah.
With Earthshot, his environmental things, I think he's struck the right tone, and his crusade against homelessness, those sort of things, and he's shown that he can relate to people generally, and I think he's avoided the pitfalls that we've seen with his brother. So I think from everything we've seen so far, I think he's shaping up to be a very good king.
Yeah.
Although, I should say for all of us, hopefully that's not for quite a long time to come.
Well, quite. I think, yes, there's always a lot of talk about when William will be king, and it does upset people because obviously we want Charles's reign to be as long as possible. But I think it's just natural, is that people are wondering what that reign will be like, and we'll talk about that. Do you have any thoughts on what his reign will be like?
I think being an heir to the throne is very difficult because any time that you suggest things you might do when you're king, it's disrespectful because you're sort of speculating about what you will do when your father's dead. So it's a tricky thing, but we have had hints of it over the years, and we've seen with recent moves such as Prince William making clear that he wants to be living in a big house on the Windsor estate rather than a palace.
Yeah.
He clearly does want to have this sort of slimmed down monarchy. He wants to focus on certain issues, key issues, and not sort of spread himself too widely. He obviously wants to be he wants to put great efforts into being a father. I think he's seen the trouble he had from coming from a broken home as he did, that he's trying to give that really safe, secure, loving environment for his children and try and avoid some of the problems that he's experienced.
I mean, it is pretty clear that he has his own views about modernising the monarchy. But there seems to be some tension there in that tactic, and you either appeal to the masses through being relatable, or does perhaps taking away some of that tradition and that glamour of real regality, does that actually turn people off the monarchy? It's a tricky balance, isn't it?
It is a balance, because I think any sort of future monarch, you'll want to let it be known that you'll do things differently. I think that's sort of par for the course. It was the same with then Prince Charles. But what we've actually seen with the king is that he has been very respectful of all the traditions associated with his mother, even things that we didn't think he was particularly interested in. If you take horse racing, it was the Queen's great love was she had a massive stud of horses and all the racing, and we thought that the king wouldn't be that bothered, but he's kept that up, and we've seen him. You remember this summer we saw him go to Royal Ascot every day, which was remarkable.
Yeah.
And all these traditions, beloved of the Queen, he's kept up. So I suspect that despite all the sort of suggestions that William will do things very differently, when it comes to it, maybe we won't. Personally, I kind of hope that's the case.
Yeah.
Like
evolution, not revolution.
Yeah, and, the things that I like about the royals is the pomp and circumstance, as you know, is the velvet and feathers of the Order of the Garter ceremony and things, which William has embraced, much to the amusement of his wife at the parades. But I think if you throw that out and you become something different, which you could do, you could be a monarchy in the style of some of the European ones on the continent, where they're very scaled down, sort of bicycling monarchs.
But they don't have the international standing that the British monarchy does in the same way, do they?
No, it's a much smaller sort of whole operation, and that would be a radical change, which I'm not sure the British people want. I think, what they want from a monarchy is that that sense of tradition, yes, but also some of the grandeur and the pomp and circumstance.
That said, it leads me nicely to a question that Melody has asked. What's the biggest permanent change you've seen for the monarchy since Queen Elizabeth passed away?
Well, I don't think we have seen too many radical changes, really. I think the thing that struck me, actually, is sort of how much more tactile King Charles is than his mother. And I think it's partly because she was queen for so long, there was so much respect, and obviously by the end she was a very elderly woman, that people kept their distance. Obviously you wouldn't touch the Queen, and from your Australian background the scandals about, an Australian Prime Minister
because
daring.
he touched this bit of her. Bit.
Yeah, that was a big scandal. But we've seen with King Charles, he's remarkably tactile. So he's been hugging people.
New Zealand footballers, American tourists.
Oh, you remember with the Kiwi footballers, it was a full-on sort of group hug, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I sort of, in a way, I didn't see that coming.
And I was really surprised when I mentioned the tourist thing. I don't think I've ever saw Queen Elizabeth just surprise a gang of tourists on the street. Hello, which King Charles did, which I thought was incredible.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, his health problems have played a part in it. I think that his cancer has drawn him to the public, even quicker perhaps, that sympathy, and well, it's that sort of intimations of mortality, isn't it?
Yes.
The fact, who knows how long he'll be around, that has really warmed him to people, and
absolutely.
And I think that's increased that level of affection. So yeah, it has been quite touching, really.
Well, based on your interactions with the royal family over the years, Jen Investing says, I hear stories about royals being spoiled and also about royals being down to earth. Which is true? If it's a combo, which royals act spoiled and which are truly down to earth? I mean, is this a question of not what you know, but what you're allowed to tell us?
It's tricky, isn't it? Because when we actually meet the royal family, obviously they're on parade. It's one image. Who knows what they're like when the doors shut. I mean, unfortunately, recently we've had some terrible insights with Andrew Loney's book about Prince Andrew, where it's been a litany of examples of petulant, spoilt behaviour, and often it seemed that people were quite keen to tell the author.
That's what struck me about
the examples they were sort of queuing up.
Yeah.
And I have to say that with Prince Harry too, because that's been a big disappointment, because Harry did have that example of a down-to-earth royal that you could get on with, that people probably thought he was all right, but then what came across strongly from his book was that sense of entitlement. I would say sport, the whinging about not having the nicest bedroom when you're staying at Balmoral or stuff like that, it wasn't, I'm sure, what he intended. But then you're thinking, actually, he came across as, a real sport brat.
Yeah, I mean, it's not all bad being royal, is it?
No. I mean, I think it's very hard if you're surrounded by people who are telling you, you're marvellous the whole time, or who are there to, wait on your every need. And I think William and Catherine are very much aware of this, that they don't have huge numbers of staff, and I think I'm not sure they'll have any live-in staff at all at their new home.
Right.
So I think they're very much aware, and I know that Princess Diana was always keen, that's why she was desperate to take her sons to homeless shelters and places to show them, the way that you live is not how others live.
Yeah.
And that really did make a big impression on them. But I think it must be hard not to sort of feel entitled or feel spoiled. And unfortunately, I think we've seen with Andrew and with Harry that they have been.
It is an extraordinary life to live, isn't it, from every angle. But anyway, as a royal reporter, you'll know more than anyone that some readers and viewers of the show perhaps are less keen on the royals. So A.E. Greenwald has asked for some rather cheeky advice, I think. It's like, how can I respond to what they call a pro-republic freak in justifying the monarchy?
Well, I would just say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean, the
the
monarchy...
pro-republic freaks would say it's broke, but anyway, yeah.
Well, I would say that the monarchy has served Britain very well down the ages. And generally, I'd say the countries, particularly European ones, that that have monarchies, it has helped them. It's helped provide stability. I would, look to the example of Spain, where the king intervened when there was a military coup. I mean, if they had got him on side, it could have been successful. I think it was back in 1981. And he had a big influence. He came on TV and condemned that coup. And so I think in circumstances like that, they can be effective. And I think Queen Elizabeth was probably hugely effective over the years in offering advice. And certainly we have heard that from prime ministers about how, maybe they've had to rethink things.
Well, and we know in recent times, haven't we, that King Charles has definitely had his uses in terms of diplomacy between America and Canada and with all our current woes.
I think he's definitely played a part, yeah. And remember when they asked Tony Blair what was his biggest regret, and he actually talked about bringing in a ban on fox hunting. And it had been the royal family that, they were always keen fox hunters with, Prince Charles and lots of others, members of the family, and that they'd impressed upon him how important it was to country communities.
Sorry, that was Tony Blair's biggest regret? That
was certainly the one he admitted to, yeah. I mean, you could argue that he should have far bigger, such as going to war in Iraq, but no, that was the one that he mentioned in his memoirs.
I'll just leave that there without a comment. Now, this is a question that got me thinking, and I'm dying to hear what you have to say. Katie B asks, if you could time travel forward or backwards to any time, which monarch's reign would you choose to live under? Not Henry VIII for me, because I wouldn't have been allowed to wear purple as a lowly serf. Yeah.
God, I love period dramas. I definitely wouldn't travel forward. For me, I'm kind of superstitious about that. I don't want to know what happens in the future. I'd never like to have my fortune told. So
you don't want to see little King George on the throne?
Well, who knows? Maybe I will. We'll see.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Hopefully I'll live long, I'm sure.
Maybe, yeah.
I think Prince George has got the makings of a good king.
Yeah.
We've seen, actually, there's been some quite interesting interactions he's had. I remember when Prince William was introducing him to veterans at an event, and he seemed...
He's really growing up now, isn't he?
He is. Yeah. But he seemed genuinely, really engaged, was asking intelligent questions, seemed respectful. I think, they're bringing the children up very well. I think in terms of going back, I don't know, I'd quite like to maybe go back to the time of the Georgian times, George III,
Ooh.
See if we can convince the Americans to stay with us.
Yeah, maybe not.
Who knows? History could be so different.
I think you're right. As a huge fan of the musical Hamilton, I think that's the period I'd be really interested in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So maybe go back to then. But I think, to be honest, I'm too beloved of my sort of creature comforts. I'm not sure I could go back to an era, before central heating or any of these things.
Or toothbrushes, yeah. No, thank you. Well, here is another fantastical yet fascinating question from Amy Miller, who asks, if Richard could ask any royal one completely uncensored question with a guarantee they'd answer honestly, who would you ask? And what would you ask? Loving Palace Confidential as always. Special shout out to Rebecca for her insight, and extra love to Joe, fellow Aussie pride. G'day. Thank you for that. I love hearing from fellow Australians. Richard, are you actually going to tell us what you would really ask as an unfiltered question?
What a question.
I don't think you're going to.
What a great question. There are so many questions.
I think you're going to filter your unfiltered answer here.
That I could ask. But I think I'd sit down with Prince William and say, come on, what do you really think about your brother?
Yeah.
I'm not sure that he would feel able to give an answer. We've heard a few hints over the years, and we've certainly heard things from friends.
Was there really a broken dog bowl? Was there really in that punch-up?
I'd certainly like to hear his version of those events at Nottingham Cottage.
Yeah, indeed. I think you're not alone there. Well, finally, Richard, saved the toughest question to last. The people demand to know, where do you get your socks?
Well, I was actually buying
They're
them from
actually a bit of a letdown today. They're more of a sombre mood, if I may say.
Sorry.
Yeah.
But no, I was buying them from a British company called Pantherella. But last year they stopped making their socks in Britain. They've moved production overseas. So I think I'm going to switch my loyalties to Corgi in Wales, because that was the factory that was visited by the Princess of Wales early this year. So, I like to support British businesses where we can.
Yep.
So I'll have a look at Corgi's website, see if the socks might appeal to me.
You heard it here first. That is all from us today on this very special Q&A episode of Palace Confidential. I've enjoyed it. I hope you have. A huge thank you to Richard for being so open to answering your most pressing questions. Tell us, who would you like to see in the hot seat next? Perhaps we can convince our Rebecca to come on and be grilled by me. In the meantime, you should sign up to the free Palace Confidential newsletter for even more Richard and Rebecca by scanning the QR code on screen now with your phone camera, or following the link in the description below. A huge thanks again to Richard for joining me today, and for everybody who sent in their questions. We will see you next time on Palace Confidential. Goodbye.